welcome back. We are now ready for our second presentation of the day. We're going to have a roundtable discussion about sustainability and innovation beyond that traditional focus. For this roundtable, we're going to have Mario Asteta, VP and General Manager at Riscals, as moderator. And as panelists, we're going to have Pilar Bañal from Chile, who is Global Director of Development at Hortifruit Genetics. We're going to have Tony Burgess, former robotics engineer in the nuclear and drug discovery industries, and Stefan Rousseff, Technical Director at Berry World. So let's go ahead with our second presentation of the day, titled Sustainability and Innovation Beyond that Traditional Focus.
All right, you hear me well? Yes? Okay. So, Luis, I want to thank you for the invitation. I want to thank Peter, obviously, for also, helping and sharing IVO another year. And obviously, Luis, again, my recognition for organizing this. Gaston, also for your help, and everyone at the organizing committee. This is obviously a really strange way of interacting, and I guess we're getting used to these things. I really do hope that soon we'll be able to meet again, because obviously a lot of what makes these meetings interesting and IVO is precisely the opportunity to see each other person to person. But when it is COVID, it is what it is, and we need to make it work. So I'm really happy to be sharing this panel. When Luis approached us with the idea of trying to think what would be of interest, clearly a couple of things came to me, and one of it has to do, obviously, with sustainability, and for many reasons that I think we all share. And then the next thing we said, if sustainability is becoming such a major challenge, and for business everywhere, what type of focus do we want to bring in? And it was more about thinking where we want to go, less about where we are or where we've been. And that's why innovation came as an idea. And then we went on trying to define what would be the four key elements that we can connect to this element of sustainability and innovation. And we defined four basic areas. Okay, one had to do with genetics. Another one links to the consumer component of what consumers see and want. And then the third one had to do with packaging, which is elevated everywhere. And I think most of us are acting on the idea of where we should take packaging. And then the fourth one had to do with sustainability and environment as a component. So I would start with three words, and then we go on as we've done before on previous conferences, to try to present a few slides to give context to the way we're approaching this as a group, as a panel. But the three words I'd like to bring in is alternatives and choices, because what we will go through in this hour and a half is precisely in the idea of what are the alternatives, what are the choices. There's no perfect one, and they, what might represent an opportunity and something of value to somebody, but might not be seen the same way by other people. And probably the best example right now is what's developing between plastic and paper packaging, and how those two seem to be not confronting each other, but generating a sense of where is it that we should be going with them. But at the end, it's about choices, the possibility of having both. The other two are the ones we've always said. This is about being open and trusting what we say. As panelists, obviously, and those many of you have been on the situations, you obviously try to give your point of view. But again, we need to trust that we can share views and that they will be taken in good faith, because it is what we believe and what we think. And I would say that the third element here is challenging all of us. These panels and these conferences work on the idea that we actually come out of them at times with more questions than answers. And that's the intent of this panel, to challenge the way you think, the way you see how you're managing, and the way you see the future. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through some slides. I hope it works. Give me a second. So what you will see on the slides that I hope we can get on the screen very soon is a little bit of a challenge, giving context to some of what eventually is happening in terms of sustainability. A big component also that links to sustainability is labor. And so that's an element we also want to discuss because of the impact it has. And then a reflection of a little bit of what's the background on what's happening with packaging, what's a little bit of the background of what's happening with genetics, and obviously comments about sustainability. And in the context of sustainability, obviously water plays a major role, CO2 emissions too, and the role of agriculture on it. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Not yet?
We can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
You can see it, great. Okay, so first, as I've done in other, if I can get it going. Okay, so first, as I've done at other times, when we've been together, I always start with some reflections or comments. So this one is, the world is moving so fast these days that the man who says it can't be done is generally interrupted by someone doing it. And you would think this is probably, written or mentioned by someone, in the past few years, when things really have been changing. But you can see this is by this guy, Albert Herbert, who was a philosopher more than a century ago. So, he was thinking things were moving fast. You can imagine just what he would think if he was here now. And then this one is, many great ideas have been lost because the people who had them could not stand being laughed at. So again, this is, we don't have the author of this one, he's anonymous. But again, this is about, let's take chances. And some of the challenges we have really speak for being bold about what we're trying, the ideas we have and what we need to do. So a little bit of background then, agriculture today, you can see the impact it has. And the comment here is the role it's playing. And I think IVO and the very sector is a very strong example of helping development and things move up economically for people. Obviously, we will see that we're still far away from where we should be. But no doubt, it does have a positive impact on raising incomes compared to other sectors. And you can see that in 2018, it accounted for 4% of GDP globally, but in some places, it actually went up to 25% of GDP. And I think if there's a country that reflects this clearly, is Peru, and the impact of agriculture in the whole development of the country as a great example. But it's also the same in many others, South Africa, Chile, Mexico, Morocco. So I think we all can agree on this. This one is the Gini coefficient. Many of you have seen it. And this one speaks about inequality. And interesting enough, the ones that are in red is where you have a lot of inequality taking place. The greener ones are the ones that tend to be more equal. So you can see Japan where it stands. But interesting, the U.S. has a high Gini coefficient, which means there's a lot of inequality, and you can see the countries there. But if you see where we operate, as IVO or as industry, a lot of these places, while still not where they should be, they do seem to be allowing for a certain amount of equality to be built up. And if you see the Gini coefficient of years past, you would get a sense of how this has been evolving and the impact we're having. Okay, in terms of the challenges on climate, for example, we are about 25% of greenhouse emissions. And I think this is one where we're trying to learn really what it is that we need to do and what we can do. In my personal case, for example, I have to admit this is an area that I still do not understand well enough, and that I need to build up my knowledge, and then the reality of what is it we can actually do about it. Another one is water use. So agriculture accounts for 70% of water use, which is major. And this is the one input that I think we all agree is becoming more and more challenging, and would probably be, together with labor, the biggest limiting factor of what we do growing blueberries and soft fruits. And then another topic here, and Stefan is going to address it, links to the loss of food produced, which is also a major issue, which in recent years you've seen it starting to be addressed because of the impact it has. All right. Then we go on to what is it that we think we could be doing. So genetics clearly has a big role to play. Pilar will go over it. Here I put a comment by the Royal Society way back 11 years ago on what is it that we need to do and what genetics can do. And I highlight two things here. One is better adapted to mechanical harvest, which I think we're all asking ourselves, again, what is it that's going to happen? I'll show a couple of slides. And then how do we develop plant structures based on genetics to optimize for labor? Packaging is the next one, and I think we all agree. And what's the impact been in terms of cutting food waste and being able to reach markets and our consumers properly? But an example of the EU is that a third of the 510 million residents produces 35 kilos of plastic packaging waste every year. It is a reality. It's not that it's bad or good. I think we all agree that the key is not the waste component, but the possibility of reusing. I think that's the biggest focus. Or what are the other alternatives? Okay, a big factor also has to do with cost, and the cost of packaging obviously varies and has a big impact. So you can see examples of cost. The ones that look a little bit pink are those that come from plastic or have the origin of plastic, and those that are white are what's called green alternatives. Again, I'm not judging anything; it's just reality based on this information, which I'm sure some of you could challenge on the idea that maybe some of this packaging that's done as green alternative is not as expensive, or that even plastic can be cheaper in a way. All right, then this one is about, again, the employment component. And the only comment here is again, that 34% of workers are still employed in agriculture. It's a big difference between developed countries and developing countries, obviously. And the impact of this, we feel it almost everywhere where we're operating, growing blueberries. And you can see this being reflected on news all over the place. This is about California and the impact of labor shortages. When COVID came, it was really, really tough at the very beginning, but it was recognized very soon that labor had to be brought in, and exceptions were made to bring migrant labor, particularly from Mexico into California. All right. Spain has been developing programs with Honduras. You see the situation also in Portugal. The situation in the UK, what am I going to say? All of you that are in the UK, I'm sure have clarity of what this is, the way this is impacting now with Brexit and the whole situation you're going through. But I think an element here is not only the employment component, but the way employment takes place, particularly with migrant labor. This we've addressed before at previous conferences, the situation that we went through in Mexico in 2015 with protests. Peru went through it, about a year ago, about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, for various reasons. And of course, a lot of these things that happen are not as clear as they seem to be based on what we hear from the press, because always there is backgrounds. But I think we all can agree that within the context of what we do, we have to be responsible for giving the best working conditions to our employees. And then finally, a situation that developed also in Portugal a couple of months ago with protests and issues that actually affected the Zambujeira region of the Mira really, really strong. So then the question is, what is it? If labor is becoming such a major limitation in some places, what are the options? This is about, the machines that are being developed. This is Hyderabad, for straws. There's other efforts developed for strawberries. There's work already in place to really try to optimize what's been done on the industry for mechanical harvest and move it to fresh. And it's not a matter that if it will happen, it's more a matter of when. The big question is what's going to be the impacts to some of the regions we're working, Mexico, Peru, Chile, Morocco, South Africa. Will this have an impact or not on the position we have in the market and in the industry? Right? And then another one that links to innovation. This is an example that speaks for technologies to try to slow down the mass colony, all the pollinator issues we're seeing, which are real. I think we all can attest to it. And where it's going to go, I don't know if you saw this one, but this was actually on the Wall Street about, pollination with robots. Okay, talk about innovation. I don't know, I don't know who saw Black Mirror, but there was one precisely on this one, which was really frightening. But the fact that it's already being addressed to this level also calls attention of where we're going to go and how far we're going to go. To start finishing up then the situation with carbon emissions that we spoke and the trend that's happening in different regions and the impact it has. And so this is also something that I believe obviously is really relevant on this idea of sustainability and innovation that we're trying to bring in. So now I'll just briefly touch on the panel. Pilar, as was mentioned by Luis Miguel, I think everyone knows Pilar. She's been a key part of the industry for years. So she's the global lead, director of development for Hortifruit. She's been there for 13 years. She's been very, very relevant to what Hortifruit has done in terms of genetics and expansion of the capabilities. And she has been working in many, many countries, from Chile to Peru to Mexico to the US to Europe, now to China. She has a PhD in plant physiology, a Master of Science in horticulture from Oregon State, and she's an agronomist from University of Chile, Católica of Chile. And she, besides all of this, she's also been a professor for more than 25 years there in the Universidad Católica. Okay, so the next one is Stefan Rousseff. Stefan has been 20 years working on soft fruits, and the last 14 years he has been working at Very World in the UK. And I think we all know who Very World is, so I don't think I need to go deep on explaining it. A major player, clearly a major competitor and a very good competitor in my case of Driscoll's, but really a leading company in the sector. And so he's been in the United Kingdom working before Very Well. He was managing a soft fruit farm, and he's been very focused on pre-harvest and post-harvest processes and legal and food safety compliance. And Stefan's training is on rural management and supervision. Okay, so we're really happy to have Stefan with us. Next is Tony Burgess. And this one is a really interesting one because he was a former robotics engineer in the nuclear and drug discovery industries. We won't have time, Tony, for you to explain what that is, but it really does sound impressive, no doubt. So he joined Brazil in 2003, and then he spent about 5 years designing the control systems and writing the software for it, for the heat seal machineries. And then he has been involved, for a long time, obviously, in transition from the rigid leads that we have on the clamps to the soft and flexible heat sealed film packaging that many of us are using. And so he's really focused on how you can transform the idea of packaging precisely to make it better for shelf life and have less impact for the environment, and also minimize the amount of packing we use, which is really important. And then, even though he's not with us, I do want to mention Steve Taylor because he's actually in Tanzania and he cannot connect. He doesn't have a good internet connection, but I do want to mention him. I think Steve, we all know, he's the head of Winterwood Farms. And again, he's been an integral part of IBL since I got started. So I think we all know him. I did want to mention him because he was really important on developing this panel. And unfortunately, he cannot be with us. All right. So with this, we'll pass on then now to I'll stop sharing my screen. I hope I can do it, so that we can actually go now to Pilar, and genetics, which we have now there. Okay. Thank you so much. So Pilar, let's go. I'll be watching time. I'll keep you posted on how much time we're going through. But please go, Mr. Pilar. Thank you and welcome.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mario, for the great introduction. And as you mentioned, in my case, I will bring some ideas about genetics and also give the context before we get into the round of question and answer. So the blueberry scenario 2021. So we have, as we heard last Monday from Court and Colin, global expansion. So blueberries are grown in different environments, in new environments, with new production systems. So blueberries is coming out of the ground, and we're growing them in containers, open air or under tunnels, and even moving into more intensive production systems like greenhouses. We have many new growers, probably inexperienced growers, and some other more experienced. Another great kind of like thing that is happening right now is the development of the tropical blueberry high bush. So we have a large growth of blueberries in the tropical regions. Peru is hosting this big event, and we are amazed of the incredible growth and the excellent job like the Peruvians are doing in growing this crop. And all of these blueberries in tropical environments where the environment is much more stable, so the plants is less dependent in the variability of the weather, like we have, for example, in Chile or in other temperate regions. So the management of the plants, it can give fruit basically year-round. In one location, we can have probably the production of like a long country. So that's completely different of what we have in the past. And several new varieties. So we're seeing kind of like an explosion of breeding programs around the globe. New varieties have been released with fewer information than in the past. We also have many club varieties and mainly varieties for low till and several no till. So it's a change of like the way also we've been seeing the variety developments over the years. So the new type of tropical high bush with a no till and managed by pruning systems. So all of these bring, of course, kind of like challenges for the growers, and they don't know sometimes which one to choose, right? Moving into the next one. Let's see. Changing the slide. All right. Okay, so basically what we're facing is this genetics plus environment and management. We're facing this new phenotype of blueberries. So it's not the same to have the same variety in different environments. Right now, we're seeing that same variety is changing their phenotypic characteristics, not only very size, productivity, time of productions, but also some characteristic of the fruit. I don't know why this is not letting me change, but anyway. Okay, so following in the context, we see the weather keeps changing. We're seeing every year kind of like more heat waves, rain, drought, hails, wind, in places where probably in the past we did not have that. And that is not going to change, and I think it will stay. So the new genetics need to be adapted to these new conditions. We also have more demanding markets and consumer. They're searching for better flavor, consistency in the experience of eating. So they wanted to go back and probably have the same eating experience that in the previous when the previous have that. So a better overall quality is what the consumer and the markets are looking for. So what are the challenges then? So we have kind of like the global supply is increasing from different origins. So fruit supply from different origins at the same time. Global productions implies kind of like the production curve is probably going to be flat. So how to differentiate is variety also kind of like a tool to differentiate. Production close versus far from the market. So not every variety will be good for production far away from the market. Short versus long distance shipping variety. So we need to know which variety they will last 5 days, 10 days, 20, 30, 40, 50 days of post-harvest. So not every variety, again, will be useful for every place. Again, more demanding markets and consumers, how to improve the blueberry eating experience. New pests and disease are appearing in different areas. We need genotypes to be adapted and tested in the different environments and with this climatic diversity. So also the trends and future development, we're producing and selling more online fruit. vertical farming, so more intensive production system, they're coming. So the new genetic need to be adapted to this new situation, digitalization, data analysis also. So the need of this new genetics, I think we have kind of like three main clients for these genetics. So one, from my point of view, is growers. So growers, they need to have productivity. They need easy to manage variety, tolerant to disease and pests, easy to harvest, concentrate production. In general, we need growers-friendly varieties. They need to know how to manage them, and they need to get good results out of them. Then the second one is the supermarkets and store. They want, of course, quality, good conditions. They need varieties grown under sustainable production systems. They want to be more involved also with the production, with the fruit they sell. They also want and need more information in general. And the final consumer is also one of our clients for our genetic programs. They want a great eating experience. They want consistency. And also we probably need to classify the consumers and depending on where they are. So they have different palates. So not every variety, again, will be for every consumer. So different markets and different origins will determine this difference in the preference. So the innovation, what is the new genetics? So in the case of our program in hortifruit, we're working, of course, with high quality fruit, firm, crunchy, crispy flavor, long post-harvest. We also want some precocious plants, so very short from planting to production. Managing, so we try to give the information to the growers. So we try to develop no and simple type of management. Seedless blueberries in the future, why not? Tolerant also, we said, to pest and disease. Plant architectures, we're working with towards compact genotypes for high density planting and indoor productions. Also, already Mario mentioned something about adapted to mechanical harvest for fresh. This is a big challenge, but we already started putting that challenge in our programs. So, and adapted also to different growing conditions and environments. So I just wanted to mention the Chile examples, the Blueberry Committee in Chile. In Chile, we have more than 120 varieties that are being grown in our country. And the Chilean Blueberry Committee is putting 5 different pillars, and this encourages the variety with short post-harvest life. We're far away from the markets. And one of the action that the committee took is kind of classify the varieties in 3 different groups, and only the varieties in group 1 should be keep growing in our country. So differentiation again of varieties, from a large number of varieties, we need to get smaller numbers. In the case of hortifruit, we're also encouraging and helping this replacement of variety, and we're promoting with 2 of our newest releases from our program, Keepsake and Apollo. We're going to launch a replacement program in the next couple of weeks to promote also kind of like long post-harvest varieties and of good flavor and good taste and easy to manage. They're being trialing already in Chile. And finally, some comments about our programs in hortifruit genetics. We started with breeding since 2005, and with permanent innovation. Our breeding program are located in different production areas. We already released 18 varieties, and we're proud to be released the first Divine, as the first tropical hybrid selected in the environment of Peru, using traditional breeding and with the cooperation of our newest geneticist breeder this year in 2021, including genomics starting this year. And again, we think that it's very important to breed and select in the environment where we're going to grow. And using also multiple growing system, we're testing in soil and soil production system, and with a qualified team and high-end technology and data analysis. So our mission is try to provide as much information as possible to our growers before they made the election of which variety to choose. All right, so that's kind of like, before getting into the question, that was kind of like the presentation, Mario. Okay. Back to you.
Thank you. All right. Pilar, thanks. I think it's precisely what we wanted to get a sense of, what you personally and what Hortifruit sees in terms of what the challenges are that we can respond to using genetics. And I think that the diversity of what genetics can do is clear from the field environment to the actual shipping of the fruit to responding to consumers. I think that you mentioned two that are interesting: digitalization and data analytics as two key components of where we should go. Okay, I want to apologize because I should have told all of you that one of the things we would really like, I did mention the idea of having an open exchange, but obviously to have the open exchange, we need to hear from you. So we do ask that any of you who have any questions for any of us, please put them on the chat and we'll do our best to respond. So if anyone right now, and I know it's rushing it a little bit, has any questions for Pilar, please put them on the chat so we can address them right now. If not, we'll try to do it at the end, and hopefully we'll have time to address some of the questions that might come in a little later by topic. So again, the intent is that as each one is speaking, we try at the end to respond to any questions you all might have for the panelists. Okay, Pilar. So thank you so much, and I really do want to also recognize Hortifruit and everyone at Hortifruit for what they've done through years for the industry. So now we're going to go with Stefan, and this one is really interesting because what Stefan is going to present is a summary of a very interesting survey they did consumer-wise, specific about sustainability. And so before we start, though, I do want to, I was rushing myself because I was looking at the screen. But before we start with this one, Pilar, I do want to reflect with two or three questions now that I like to see if you can bring back, and maybe then we can get some other questions from the chat. So the first one, labor, as we spoke, is really becoming a big issue. And so are you, and you did mention it, but it was not fully clear, is this a priority, developing genetics that really do respond to mechanical harvest and can be used? I know there's been efforts, and there are clearly efforts, as we know, by some people. Norfolk Creek is working on it, as I understand. I know Kurt probably mentioned it, but what's your feeling? I mean, how intentional are you being on this, and what do you think it's going to go? And do we have an idea of when it might be happening for real?
Yeah, I think thank you for the question. And yes, I mean, we are intentionally developing varieties that are adapted to machine harvestable. I think right now, as we all know, there's some varieties that are being picked by machine for fresh in the US because it's a short distance market. So the challenge, actually, the main challenge is kind of like trying to develop these varieties and being able to machine pick them for fresh, being in far away market, far away origins like Chile or Peru. But I think the sooner we start, the sooner we're going to get the varieties out. So it's one of the challenges that our new breeder, Yvonne de Ben Oliveira, she's already start doing that kind of like it's one of our goals in our program. So the sooner we start, the sooner we're going to get there. So I cannot tell you how soon, but the sooner the better, right? So, and I think we already defined the key characteristics like machine picked variety, need, and it is characteristic of the fruit, but also some architecture of the plants. So we'll see what happened, and we'll keep you updated.
And we've said it already a few times, but this is one of the biggest questions we all are facing because it does have implications as to where we produce, where we're moving towards production, in places that probably today are not even considered just because of the cost or lack of labor. Would this really become a possibility to reopen some of these regions? And let's keep in mind that as mechanical as it might be, you still will need labor. I don't think anything will come up that really puts labor away fully. All right. I will link a little bit to this, Pilar, but just a little bit. You kind of refer to grower-friendly varieties. So what is this idea of grower-friendly varieties? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I think grower-friendly varieties. It's basically think about how try to simplify the work. So the labor, the pruning, the height of the plants. So to be easy for the grower to match with the labor, basically in all the activities like harvest. So to try to put the fruit very accessible to the pickers, so we can have more yield per pickers, and so grower friendly in a broad sense. Also develop varieties that are more tolerant to pests and diseases, but and work with the growers. So in our programs, basically, we not only develop the genetics, we try to develop a package, like we transfer to the grower. And I personally work with the growers in developing all these kind of like techniques to try to transfer the package. So it's the genetic plus the management that it will make the growers' life easier. That's at least our challenge. I know that it's a long way because we always have new pests, new challenges, new diseases, different environments, different growing conditions. So it's not the same to be probably in Peru, like to be in South Chile or central part of Chile. So that's what we mean with grower friendly. So easy to grow, easy to manage, and get results soon. So we know like the growers cannot wait several years to get high yields. So we want the high yields very soon also.
Oh yeah, and the last one, just one word. If you had to think of one word that would exemplify your focus as to what consumers want, what is one word? If you think of consumers and something you need to deliver to consumers, what would be the one thing you would wish you could really deliver as best as possible to consumers?
I will say consistency if they're eating experience.
Okay.
Consistency, because we use quality, but consistency, I think, is something like we're lacking.
Okay. Perfecto, Pilar. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
I don't believe there's been any questions coming in. I don't know, Gaston, if you can let me know. As far as I can see on the chat, I don't see anything new. But again, we'll move on. What's that, Gaston? Okay, so we'll move on. Stefan, so let's go now with the survey that you developed or you have available to present. And again, let's go through it. I think it's going to be really interesting with what you're going to show us. Thank you, and welcome also again.
Oh, okay, sorry. You can now hopefully hear me okay. Well, hello everyone, and yeah, for those of you that speak Spanish, hola. Yeah, it's a great opportunity and privilege to be part of this summit. Thank you for the invitation, Mario, and obviously thank you for the introduction earlier on. Yeah, sustainability is more important than ever to businesses, and it's truly meaningful across all areas of any organization. So from building a company culture to reaching new markets, sustainability is key. So let me take you through a few slides. And as Mario said, what we've done in terms of a little survey. Before I go into the survey, I wanted to put some key stats and trends that I think we've all seen recently. Some 1.3 billion tons of food is lost, representing some 25 to 30%. That's a staggering amount. Obviously, we need to look into that. Another interesting one was some 70% of the global freshwater is used for agriculture. And looking at it from our own UK perspective, 8 of the top 10 countries that are supplying us with fruit or veg are drought prone. So that's a serious challenge. some 30% of the total greenhouse gas emissions are created by global food production. And an interesting survey I came across not long ago that some 46% of the companies embedding the UN Sustainable Development Goals are struggling. Progress is slow, and they might not, reach it on time. And I echo that. It's a process that involves multiple people. It requires multiple processes, and it's something that we collectively as businesses need to look at. In terms of trends, there's a few I've pulled out. Plastic is a key concern for shoppers, and some 74% of the shoppers are happy to pay more for sustainable packaging. And I guess this doesn't come as a surprise to any of you. We've all seen on social media all these horrible pictures of plastic in the ocean, etc. So it really doesn't come as a surprise. Consumers are willing to pay more for products that deliver on socially responsible claims. So that's very good to know at the back of our minds. And sort of like global trends on plastic waste, climate change and air pollution are key concerns based on Growth Knowledge study, including some 75,000 households. So we as Berryworld are lucky having some 5,000 shoppers of our own Berryworld brand who are happy to give us feedback and participate in various surveys we are conducting. And as a group, we thought it's good to look into that area of sustainability. So we've set the survey with two very simple objectives. This is the data I will take you through. The first objective is to assess the sustainability concern levels and if those translate into actual sustainable behaviors. Do we do what we say? And the other one is compare the expectations on responsibilities. Is it the retailers? Is it us, the suppliers? What do the general consumer think? So we came across some interesting data. In terms of the first objective, probably doesn't come as a major surprise to any of you guys. Results show high sustainability concerns, and out of these, global warming and waste are key areas. We've pulled out only the very concerning stats so that it's easier to see on the screen. So you can see 51% are very concerned about food waste, and some 37% are concerned about the global warming. Factors such as environmental impact and environmental challenges are also quite high up in the agenda. So all these we need to look at and obviously implement plans. But yeah, there's definitely potential to improve. When you look at areas such as recycling and composting or food waste, only 54% of the people paneling said that they are putting always their food waste into the compost bin, and only 82% are recycling their packaging. It was also interesting to see the reasons why consumers tend to throw food away. I guess probably doesn't come as a major surprise. The use by date, obviously it's a safety concern, so yeah, that obviously will be a big factor. Unwanted leftovers, that's an interesting one. And I was reading an article recently about our domestic household fridges and the fact that over the last, in particular, 5 to 10 years, they have expanded. Are they potentially a contributor? I mean, are we buying too much fruit that potentially will not be eaten, let's say, when it should be eaten, and therefore thrown away as leftovers? Obviously, an important factor for us was the best before date, which seems to be representing only 6%. Obviously, being in the berry category, berry industry, we were keen to understand what's happening in regards to berries. And it's good to see that respondents are more responsible when it comes to throwing berries away. And it's good to see the reasons why they're throwing them. It's mainly mold. What I didn't mention earlier, we had panelists across countries, not just UK, but France and Holland. And there's some good best practice that potentially we could all look into and share. For an example, French 90% of the respondents would say that they will always recycle. Again, from a Dutch point of view, probably doesn't come as a surprise to many of you that have been in Holland, but 71% are using bicycles on a regular basis. And in the UK, green supply sources of energy are very populous, and 47% are using it. So with regards to our second objective, responsibility, we got results that very helpful. So it is not the retailers, it is not the suppliers, effectively it's both of us. And it's pretty much identical when you look at the individual reporting points. Responsibility to protect people, it's effectively the same. Responsibility to offset environmental impact, a bit more leaning towards retailers, but virtually identical. Same with regards to the responsibility to protect the planet. So that in a nutshell was what I wanted to present and talk to you today. So I'm not sure if you have any questions.
Sure. First, two of your comments, based on what you brought up to us. One is this company culture that you mentioned. I think we went through these phases, all of us, years back on. I think quality was one, quality as a cultural component, and it was elevated everywhere. And I think that's now kind of a prevalent component of what we do. Some do it better than others, but I think the focus is there, and there's clarity throughout most organizations, and no doubt through the blueberry industry, and through IBO. Then we went, I think, to this social element, and I think that's still evolving and needs to get much higher up. But I think there's also this sense of culture commitment to social matters and labor and wellness and well-being, and that build up. I think you do touch on something that probably is the next phase that needs to be elevated, and it's precisely this culture of sustainability. And I will link that to the one comment you made, which is, do we do what we say? Okay? And I think that's one of the big things we need to ask ourselves and challenge ourselves. So we're talking about it, we're concerned, all of us are consumers, we're all people living here on this place, and obviously we see the fires, we see all these things, and we are all concerned. But then, what are we really doing? I think that's the real question. So just I want to leave it there. I do want to ask a couple of questions, and we do have, I think we're having a couple of questions coming in from the audience. But first I'd like to ask you, so you did speak about, food waste, water risk, greenhouse gases. Can you pick one of those three and tell us what is it that you suggest our companies do, organizations do? We have obviously, a lot of growers participating at the summit. We also have marketing companies, I guess we have retailers. So if you choose one of those, just choose one and tell us what is it that you suggest we do on one of those three?
Obviously, they're all big subjects. We talked about global warming and food waste. Let's look at food waste in terms of actions there. Really, the first thing when talking about food waste that comes to mind is the UN Sustainable Development Goal, the 12.3. It aims to halve global food waste at the retail, at the consumer. It was production and supply chains by 2030. So in terms of actions, speaking obviously from a UK perspective, we've adopted the Target, Measure and Act approach led by RAP. Some of you might be aware of RAP, Waste and Resource Action Program. So as a business, really the first thing is to set a food waste reduction target for your operations, adopting the Sustainable Development Goal 12.3. As part of the second pillar, measuring and reporting. Obviously, there's a variety of tools available worldwide. Individual businesses need to select what's right for them. Obviously, if there is situation like here in the UK, for within country have an organization that provides great material associated with them, because the more suppliers report the same way, obviously the more consistent the data will be. Full stop. And
yeah, keep going, Susan.
And the next pillar is take action to reduce your food waste by working in partnership with everyone in your supply chain. So as part of that, look at introducing roadmaps, assess and aim to improve every step in your supply chain. DEFRA in the UK has developed a very useful waste and resource strategy document that can be used as a reference. But there's also scenarios where fruit cannot be supplied into retail or wholesale. Look at alternative options. There are a number of charity organizations around the world that can take the surplus fruit, and that in turn will help feed people in need, as well as very quickly offsetting the food waste. And obviously, as part of all that goes, publish your data, gain public recognition on your waste commitments. Obviously, look out for what else is being published and benchmark. And last but not least, prepare for mandatory reporting on food waste. This is, if I'm to be really brief, Mario, I appreciate we have not much time. That in a nutshell is what I would say.
Really interesting, Stefan. The last one you brought up, this mandatory reporting. Again, those are the things we need to start looking forward, because when they will happen, not because if they will happen, they do pose a challenge, no, and actually a right challenge, really. So, no, thank you. And I think the other one, and I'll probably dig a little deeper at the end, is the fact that a lot of these things are really common issues. So we at times think that as companies, even big companies, can solve for a lot of these things individually. But I think that's clearly not the case. And at IBO, we've talked about it at times, and we've actually as an organization, no, and as companies together on some of these issues. But clearly, some of these challenges are so big that unless we address them together, there's no way we're going to solve for them. And it's both the reality of solving them, but also the way we deal with, demands from governments and NGOs and even retailers, non-consumers. And if there's one thing I think we need to have clear, I think we had it on the social components that we've spoken in years past. I think now in this environmental situation that's been elevated, it's exactly the same. No? It is about coming together and a way to work on some of these issues. Stefan, really interesting. Thank you so much. We'll wait to see if there's any questions coming from the group, from the listeners. We are getting a few questions, some for Pilar. So Pilar, we'll address them at the end if we have time. All right. Mm-hmm. But thank you again, Stefan. Really, really good. So we're going to move now on to Tony. And here the focus is on a very specific component and example of this situation with packaging. And again, the intent here, besides giving a little bit of background of where Tony is coming from and what he's doing, I think the intent is really to have an opportunity to reflect upon, what are these choices around? No, what is it that we could look at as alternatives from what we've been doing, all of us, to what we could be doing. And, what's the logic and viability of what these options represent. And again, just to challenge our thought process. So with nothing else, Tony, thank you so much for joining and welcome. And so I look forward to listen to what you're going to tell us and challenge us with. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mario. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the invitation to be part of the summit. I feel quite privileged to be here, so thank you very much. I think one of the most important things I do want to say to the audience is, we certainly don't have all of the answers about where packaging will go, but there are some good points of view to consider and some very conflicting points of view and arguments as well. So thank you once again. So just a brief introduction. So I'm Tony Burgess from Prosil. There's a photograph of me. I think I was a bit thinner in those years ago when that photograph was taken. Prosil is a business that was formed in 1998. It became heavily involved in soft fruit packaging and using the least amount of packaging possible to protect and package soft fruit. And we were contributed heavily to the transition of clamshell packaging or rigid lid packaging and methods that can be deployed for shelf life extension techniques. So we're heavily involved in the packaging of soft fruit. In 2019, we were acquired by the JBT Corporation. They're a huge US business with, big revenues and 20-something manufacturing sites and over 5,800 employees representing lots of brands. So just to give you a little brief background on Prosil and JBT. So as I said, we feel really quite responsible in terms of driving changes from a packaging perspective not only in the soft fruit sector, we do an awful lot of work in every category that exists for retail packaging where a rigid tray is used. But if we look back into the ages a little bit, the clamshell was actually patented back in 1976, and it became used an awful lot through the 80s and 90s in soft fruit packaging. It was the first punnet of its kind with a lid, so it was widely adopted. Just a point I want to make to the audience here is you can see the lid of the packaging here, and you can see the base of the packaging. This packaging is formed from one sheet of plastic. So what that means is there's as much plastic in the lid of this punnet as there is in the base. So it was quite an obvious transition, certainly from the UK in 2004, and then more widely in 2008, to transition from this rigid lid into a soft, flexible lid. And then you can see a couple of examples of that. I just show these just to give some context about some of the work that we've been doing in recent years. And then we step into more recently into 2008, there was an introduction of putting really, really, really small holes into soft film. And the reason for that was to create what we call modified atmosphere packaging. So the holes are that small inside in the film, you almost can't see them with your naked eye, but it's actually restricting the rate with which the blueberry is breathing, thereby slowing down its degradation. And we see some shelf life benefits from that. And then as we go forward into more 2012, we've started to see some cardboard packaging and pulp packaging. And we also have tested and trialed lots of other packaging materials, things like tapioca. We've done some heat seal trials on. We did some trials with palm trays, punnets made out of palm leaves. So a whole wide variety of different kinds of packaging has been tested and trialed over the years, and also different kinds of what we call active packaging within the punnet, whereby we may introduce oxygen into a strawberry punnet, and then inside the strawberry punnet would be something called an oxygen scavenger, where it was controlling the rate of absorption of oxygen inside the packaging. And then there'll be ethylene absorption strips, which may go into other soft fruits such as tomatoes. So we've been very involved in the evolution of packaging, and of course for shelf life extension. So just to give some kind of context to what it is I'm talking about, the picture that you're seeing there is a pallet with a load of boxes on top, and inside of those boxes are rigid lids. Now the equivalent of rigid lids we can see here. So there's our boxes taking up a lot of space, and inside those boxes are 9,350 clip-on lids, like this lid on the right-hand side over here. Or this piece of film, this is the film that the tray sealer uses, there's 9,350 lids on that roll of film. So you can see the huge difference in space that it takes up, and of course the huge difference in space that it would take up in a pack house, and the huge amount of the huge volume of packaging that needs to be transported from where it was made to where it's needed is also a huge reduction. That clip-on lid weighs 9 grams of plastic, whereas the film lid weighs 1 gram of plastic. So that's another huge difference. And there's a pretty big cost difference to those two things too. Certainly in the EU, we see a lid will cost in the region of 4 to 5 cents, whereas a heat sealable film lid is around 1 to 2 cents. So there's two really big benefits. So this change, so saving 10 tons of plastic for every 1 million trays sealed is quite a significant statistic. And I mentioned a moment ago freeing up space used to store packaging materials, and not to mention the CO2 used to transport them in the trucks from where they're made to where they need to be. So there's some pretty strong driving factors that's pushed these changes through. Just to give you a little bit of context of what this thing looks like on the retailer shelf, there's some pretty photographs there, I guess, in soft fruit and in blueberries. So, as I said at the start of these slides, there's a lot of controversy in the marketplace and indeed on the internet. We know that if we consider paper or pulp or cardboard packaging versus plastic, we know that paper can require up to 3 times more energy to manufacture than plastic. What it does depend on is where the materials are being sourced from. We know that in the EU, around 90% of plastic is made from virgin fossil fuels, predominantly petroleum, whilst only 9% of it is made from recycled materials. Cardboard is made from paper, which comes directly from trees, obviously. Trees regrow, so they're classed as renewable. But it really depends on whether the wood is sourced from deforestation or from sustainable wood that is grown specifically for the purpose of manufacturing. And this is a huge unknown area in industry. Some other conflicting points of view. So we know that the paper industry is one of the most sustainable in the world, with a growing emphasis on responsible logging, waste reduction and tree replanting, whereas plastic comes from non-renewable sources. However, plastic is made via a more efficient process that requires around 40% less energy than cardboard and producing less waste. So we know that plastic is recycled less than cardboard, but it may be better suited for recycling in the longer term to address food waste. Not just in, as I said, not just in the soft fruit sector, but in all other sectors of the food that we eat that's in our fridges. An interesting statistic here from in the back garden of our own British government, which is Westminster. The Westminster Council sent 82% of all household waste, including that was put into recycling bins. So, Stefan, I was interested to see your statistic on who puts stuff into the recycling bin. However, it went to incineration. 82% of it went into incineration in 2017 and 2018. So not so long ago, and I imagine it's very similar today. One of the things that we do know is that reducing the weight and thickness of packaging is the best way to minimise the impact on the environment and keep the cost down. Just linking that to the transportation of packaging from one place to another, the lighter it is, the less fuel that's going to be burned on the truck taking it, and obviously the better for the environment. There was a study done by a gentleman called Guy Watson, who was actually, I think he was a banker from London, who decided to change his life and become a grower. And he works at a company called Rutherford Organics. And he says that plastic boxes could reduce the carbon footprint of his company's packaging by 70%. He strongly hinted that the company wanted to move to plastic immediately, but is frightened of the reaction of customers. A poignant point, I think. And just analysing his carbon footprint, so he's broken it down here. There's staples and clipping wire, polypropylene bags, plastic punnets at 2%, paper punnets and lids was 19%, netting, stitching, paper bags 7%, degradable bags 6%, and his boxes were 59% of his, I think, 714 tons of packaging. So quite a lot and quite a heavy burden on his CO2 footprint. And we know that householders continue to see plastic as wicked and paper-based products as benign. But when considered over the entire life of the packaging, paper and cardboard embody far more greenhouse gases than their plastic equivalents, and that's come from the study that was done by Mr. Watson. So with that, Mario, that's, I guess, the brief summary of the slides that I wanted to share with the audience.
Yeah, Tony, so you build up on precisely the idea of, using this opportunity to start challenging your thought processes. And I have to tell you, you do leave me with a lot of questions, no? And
Yeah.
Pilar did it and Stefan did it. Now you add to it. At first, interesting not to so visually understand the evolution of how packaging has moved, no, from the hard punnet and sealing, and then to the thinner plastic films, no, to the films. Interesting also how simple it is, but how truthful it is. The idea that it's thickness and weight, no, and we don't think of those things, but it really does make a big difference, no doubt about it. And I think the big question is precisely, the idea of how we understand the footprint, the carbon footprint, and then, what are the elements we might not be seeing, all right? We do have a few questions, or a couple of questions, but let me start with one, okay, that I think would be interesting. So, why if paper, so we have the perception or the reality that indeed paper is more ecological, no, than plastic in a certain manner, and you gave elements to it in terms of the physical component for we're talking. Clearly, the issue here is recyclability, no? I think that's what you're saying. But then at the end, why do you think that some retailers are pushing the paper component? I have to say it, and I will say it openly. Driscoll's, in particular, is really focused in one of our regions to really move to paper packing with film. Okay, but I hear you, and I hear the others, and I question. I ask myself a few questions too. So why are retailers pushing for the paper component? How deep are they looking at the reality of what it really means? From a full, carbon footprint component. What's your feeling, huh?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Mario. Obviously, and I think first of all, from a consumer's perspective, they've seen all of the stuff in the media and on social media about how bad plastic is. So the second that they see something cardboard, the belief is that it has far little carbon impact than its plastic competitor, if you will. When you touch it, it gives a warm feeling to touch. So this is giving the specific idea, whereas plastic has a cold feeling to it, a cold feeling and a cold sentiment around it. But if we just look at a couple of stats to give some, I suppose, associated with the question, if you produce 1 kilogram of cardboard, it takes 3 kilograms of wood to produce that cardboard. And that uses 350 litres of water to produce 1 kilogram of cardboard. So we spoke about water being a problematic thing in other presentations. If you manufacture 1 kilogram of plastic, PET plastic, it uses 2 kilograms of petroleum, and it uses 180 litres of water. Okay? When you come to manufacture recycled cardboard, the energy consumption is indeed reduced by 50%, and the water consumption is reduced by 25%. But when you recycle plastic, the energy consumption is reduced by 88%, and the water consumption, some companies are claiming, is zero. So there's some clear differentiators there. And of course, cardboard in Europe is 82% of it is recycled right now. It's a thing that's happening. To touch onto the weight message that you said earlier, if you take a cardboard punnet and it's plastic equivalent variant in terms of dimensions, it's about 50% heavier. And I weighed some earlier just to check my facts on this one. It's around 50% earlier. So to consider the fuel burn transporting that punnet from one place to another is quite considerable. But the fact remains that we're recycling way more cardboard than we are plastic right now. So to me, it's an obvious thing that Driscoll's are doing or other retailers are doing to push cardboard packaging into the to the consumer. And they're knocking on an open door in many ways with the consumer because they know they're going to lift the packaging off the shelf. So is there a marketing piece involved there? So there's no question that plastic's got a part to play in the future when we consider the recycling chains that need to exist. But right now, in this moment, it does make a bit of sense that paper is better. Is it more ecological? I don't know. But for the moment, it's probably the lesser of the two evils, if you will.
Yeah, I think, for this one, the way we reflect upon it with all of you is the fact that, again, there's clearly also a marketing component, let's not deny it, but it only works if there's reality behind it, no? In terms of what paper represents and the options it provides. But as I said at the beginning, I think that the thought process of all of us is having alternatives, because having alternatives will drive innovation. No? It will lead to finding out, where we can really move towards this full recycling component everywhere. I mean, we have a lot of limitations on plastic recycling for things that probably could be solved just based on this push for alternatives. No, the water use on recycling of paper, maybe that's a major one. No? That's a big concern on making paper and recycling. And there has to be something there, hopefully, that will challenge the way it's done. Okay, but so really interesting. I think for all of us, it's just to look behind, make sure we look behind what we're seeing on the image we get. What we see up front is clearly not reflecting many times what's happening behind. Now, there's a question from a person from the audience, basically saying, to achieve a 100% sustainable product makes it much more expensive. So the question here is, do we really believe consumers all over the world are willing to pay the price difference? So this is for you, but I would say, Stefan, also, no? Any of you that would like to address this one? Maybe Tony, a brief comment, and Stefan, maybe you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to give a brief comment, and it's just the conception of what is sustainable, because we know that plastic can be sustainable. So I guess the gentleman or the person asking the question is assuming cardboard is the sustainable piece of material there.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Stefan, any comments from your side? What's your view on this question?
Yeah, it's a complex area, because to me the answer really, Tony's right in terms of concept of sustainability. To me, the key is recycling and making recycling widely available. Tony just gave the stats. I'm not going to repeat in terms of the pros and cons for the two. Effectively, if we have recyclable centers and options for consumers, and the packaging itself is also design made in a format that can be easily recycled, instead of having PET and PRT combination, it's just one type of plastic. I think this will also make it more widely recyclable and subsequently also sustainable. It's a tricky question. There's no right or wrong answers, because it's a bigger piece that needs to be considered, unfortunately.
I agree, Stefan. I'll give you a comment. Pilar, you have any comment on this one?
No comment from my side.
Okay. I'll give one example. And in some places, we could probably think that organic production, it's kind of the poster of the logic of sustainability in a way. Well, I'm not talking packaging. No, I'm just talking just the production component of it. And there are places where some companies and some growers are actually being able to be as productive on organic production as they are on conventional. All right. And and productive means yield-wise and cost-wise. So if you have to choose, is organic, and I know there's a lot of there will be a lot of doubts on organic as a concept, and there's skepticism to a degree, but reality is that some of the tools used there do have a logic, in terms of whatever we call sustainability. But I think when you get to that stage where actually you can be as productive, then the business case is made, so that you can compete, which is addressing the question being asked. Because clearly there's some places where people are willing to pay, but there's many, many, many places but people not only are not willing, probably cannot even pay for that. All right. So, and we all are clear that we're competing. And so it is also an element of competition that we need to address, because there's a reality of pricing and cost that exists and won't go away. So this obviously becomes a challenge. All right. Okay. One question, Tony, that's very specific, and we hear a lot about plastic in the oceans and where that's happening. I really would like to understand, in your view, because you're involved on this industry and on the consequences, where is that coming from? Is there really a lot that's actually being used by what we do and what we use?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Mario. I mean, there's no question that food packaging is responsible for a lot of the plastic in the ocean. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is that around 20 to 30% of plastic in the ocean is, in fact, from fishing nets. The research will tell us. And there's some other huge factors. When we wash our clothes, synthetic-based clothing, and we wash it and we rinse it with soap, and it goes into the waste streams and it goes into the rivers, and the rivers lead to the oceans, which is where how plastic can get into the ocean. We're washing away microfibers of plastic, microplastics, and the filtration systems in where we clean the water before it goes into the ocean cannot pick up on these microplastics. So there are those things to be considered. When you make a cup of tea with a tea bag, there's microplastics in the tea bags. There are companies out there that are launching plastic-free tea bags because we know that we make a tea. There's all kinds of other reasons as to why there's plastic in the ocean. I think there's something like 8 million pieces of plastic a day get dropped into the ocean. And for us, we as an industry, certainly from my perspective, we've got to obviously reduce the amount of packaging used to as little as possible. But then local governments and industries need to be into a position where they are making it easier to recycle. In a way, landfill or other means, it should be almost banned in a way, and there should be an absolute mandate on recycling, because we're doing it. It's happening. The plastic is going into the ocean. It's not all food packaging, but it's a lot of it. So it's up to the plastic industries to get a grip of this and make the recycling chains a little bit simpler, and collections a little bit easier to. Collections need to be better adopted, and more segregation of what's in your recycling bin when you put it in there. So yeah, good question.
Interesting, and I thank you for the clarity. Stefan, any comments? I mean, this is obviously an area that you're passionate about. Anything to complement on this one?
Sorry, my computer's playing. I echo what Tony says. I don't have any further comments. If plastic is good, if it's managed well, and obviously, I agree with Tony. Collectively, we need to communicate to consumers and enable them to recycle.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's clearly one thing that's coming out of this. It's the options need to be there, and the enforcement to a degree has to be there, where possible, because that's the only way at times things will happen. So yeah. Okay, Pilar, I'll go up to a couple of questions that were raised before to you. So one, first, someone congratulates you about the presentation and asks about if from all the varieties, and I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question, that they connected to when we think of varieties and genetics, what is it, or what are the pathogens that we could probably think of that are affecting, post-harvest? And we talked about mold, and there's different elements there. Are we doing a lot in terms of breeding for resistance on some of these post-harvest pathogens? I mean, is there anything there? I mean, because obviously we saw food waste, Stefan. We saw the amount that's lost to mold, for example, and mold is physiological, but there's a pathogen component. Anything there?
Yeah, I think the question say, what is the pathogen, the most important pathogen? And I think post-harvest, as you said, kind of like mold and decay, And without any doubt, it's botrytis. Although we know that there are some others, but if we can do something about, and what we're trying also is our goal, to develop markers also to put in, to try to identify, I would say, tolerant varieties to this pathogen. But I think it's a way to go still. And being, again, kind of like in our case, the production of faraway countries, I think mold and decays are without any doubt a big problem. And it is across varieties. So it's an interaction, of course, with the environment, but susceptibility to botrytis is a big issue for our production regions, I think, around the globe. It's not exclusive for long distance shipment, but of course it is more important in long distance shipments. So I think it's also in our priorities, the development of markers to identify those genotypes are more tolerant to these pathogens.
Yeah, I think that's one. If someone can sort that one out, I think it's going to be really important. It will really make a major difference. I would say more than any other, pathogen. It's the component. There's many we need to solve for, but this would be one that would be really relevant. There's no doubt about it. Okay, as I mentioned, Steve didn't make it to the meeting, but Steve did develop a few questions. I'm not going to ask any of you to answer them unless anyone wants. But as I said at the beginning, it's more about leading the questions. And I connect this to the idea of doing what we say we do. But, and then again, the first one, for example, let's assume, and this is coming from me as a consumer, okay? And, I think a lot of what I'm learning from listening to all of you is the fact that we are not understanding what's behind some of the things we're doing, all right? Or some of the claims we're making. So I think one, it's not a question, one thing, and this relates again to talking to Steve and some of the concerns that have been raised is, let's just walk out of here with the idea that, we need to be clear on what is really good for the environment and what's just a claim to position ourselves, no? And we can link it to us as individuals, as companies, as customers or consumers, okay? And let's just assume that we have a responsibility to really make the right decisions based on what we are, trying to commit to and make happen, okay? Again, and this is not about who gets first to claim the best solution or the best positioning. I think it is about, how we all can get there together. Because if someone solves for a certain issue on sustainability, because I'm glad for it, but it's really about how we solve it for all. And I would say there's no competitive edge on this one, okay? Because no one wins if we all lose, and we don't solve for these issues. But I would say that would be one thing I would like to address as a reflection. We have a couple minutes left. I'll bring up a couple other questions, okay? Pilar, well, to everyone, I think also Stefan, probably you can also participate on this one, but this is one that speaks about the fact that, there's so many varieties coming into the market. And so are we, by having so many options, not going in a way of confusing consumers and customers on having all this wide range of things? And, it's a new industry, relatively speaking, in some places, no? And there's a lot of need for knowledge. So is there anything there we can bring a sense? And I guess that's where IBO, a place like IBO can help to build up this idea of what quality is and what is it that we need to deliver to the consumer, no? But any comments on this one? Because indeed, we do have a lot of choices now. It is really wide, all over the place. So how do we make sense of all this diversity and possibilities?
Yeah, I think kind of like in blueberries, we're not selling per variety, right? So it's a product, it's a commodity, like it's a blueberry, and people kind of like, of course, see kind of like the shape of the fruit, the size of the fruit, but they don't see, of course, the flavor neither the sugar or the acid content, neither the firmness, right? So having a wide range of varieties will probably have also one wide range of eating experience. So they look alike, but they taste different, right? And the texture is different. So what we can do about that, right? So maybe we should put some extra information about the characteristic of the varieties, so the consumer will exactly know if they want a more sweet, a more acidic berries, a more crunchy berry, a more juicy berries. They will know, they will have the information. So that will be one idea. Because if we want consistency in the eating experience, the consumer right now is just evaluating by visual evaluation. And of course, supermarkets are some of the more exigent supermarket, or some more the UK supermarket. They have a list of varieties that they want, and some list of varieties that they don't want anymore, right? And they classify according to tiers or categories, and because they know probably more their customers. But probably we need to do something about that, kind of like describing better the characteristic of the varieties will be one idea, and kind of like so for the consumer to know exactly if they need some varieties for some purposes or some others. Same thing with the market, of course. It's not the same we're sending to China, to the UK, or to the US. Well, those are kind of like the ideas. We need to probably give more information about our varieties.
Good. All right.
Yeah,
go ahead.
From my point of view, obviously blueberry, very different to raspberry and strawberry. They only harvested several times. So naturally, there will be a wider range of varieties. And then obviously we're having Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, which then brings another set of genetics. So I agree with what Pilar is saying. I think having so many varieties, they're there for a reason. Of course, there's obviously a number of work streams in terms of programs producing new genetics. That's a separate subject, but altogether, having wide range of varieties helps consistent availability. Is all we're going to say.
Right. I agree fully. I think again it's a matter of choice and information, no? And the way the industry is evolving. I think we all have to be really glad that there's been so much investment on genetics and improving, because it's actually building up the position of blueberries where it is. And a lot of it has to do obviously with the genetics, no, as a key component. But we need to wrap it up. What I would ask is if you can maybe in one sentence conclude what you get out of this panel. Okay, so just one sentence of whatever you think is worthwhile to leave as a message here. So Pilar, you started, so you go. So one sentence of what you would like to leave as a key message.
Good luck with the varieties you choose. Now, think about what varieties you're choosing and try to get as much information basically in the varieties you're choosing. You're making a decision for a long time. And there's many alternatives, so try to get information. Information, I think, is key before you choose as a grower on what variety to select.
Okay.
And good luck. Good luck.
All right. Very good. Stefan, one sentence. What would you like to leave us with? Or what do you walk out of this one?
Food waste is water availability and carbon footprint. Obviously very important subjects. Only briefly touched upon them. But yeah, let us all look into them and let's try and do the best we can in order to be good for our planet.
Okay, good. Tony?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to packaging, do the research. Do the research on what impact packaging is having on shelf life extension, and do the research on the if you can find it in the internet, and there's an awful lot of data in there, but just try and get a balance for what is more sustainable or not. My message.
I agree fully. So, okay, I want to thank the three of you again, Steve, which is not with us, for taking the time for your presentations, for being open about what you see and your concerns. I also, I'll tell you the ones I live with. I think this idea of being informed and do the research is key. We really need to be responsible about understanding what's behind things, all of us, okay? I also agree, Stefan, that we barely touch on the reality of some of the things we need to do. But I do connect it to what I mentioned on the idea that some of these issues really need to be solved jointly. And I can give you examples everywhere. In Mexico, what we've gone through in Algarve, in Portugal, the last months with the issues that we've had in the region, because of COVID, the crisis with labor. These are things that really need to be solved together, and the environmental components we're talking about. So I do encourage, I would ask, and are we as IBO, feeling we're doing everything we can to elevate this as we move forward? And I do challenge Kurt, Peter, all of us. And Kurt, I also want to thank you and recognize your work, obviously, for IBOs these many years, all right? But I think this is one we should really think of elevating, just like we talked about labor a couple of years ago. And in labor, I think we could have tapped upon a lot more, okay, on what it means and the challenges we have. We talked about it, thinking of genetics and also the impact of automation. But I think this with water, as I said at the beginning, will be one of the major driving forces of where we're going to go and how we're going to go about it, all right? So thank you very, very much. Luis Miguel, I don't know if you're still around, if you want to give a message at the end, or Gaston, anyone? Not to wrap it up. And again, thanks for all the participants for joining. Thanks for the questions and for supporting IBO and making it a success this year, even as complex as getting it done has been. And again, thank you for organizing this to the whole team in Peru and to Proranderos. And thanks for inviting me. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the stage. Thank you very much, Mario, for moderating this interesting panel discussion. So many questions coming in. Thank you to Pilar, to Stefan, and Tony for being part of the IBO Summit 2021. So now we're going to have a quick break before we jump into our third presentation of the day with David Hughes, who is going to talk about quality and consumer preferences. Again, I remind you to take the time to visit the commercial area and explore the different stands of our IBO Summit sponsors. Once you get to the commercial area, you can click on the map and you can go into the different categories. In the titanium and diamond categories, we have Planasa, Fall Creek, Hortifruit, Camposol, and Nature Ripe. Thank you very much for sponsoring this event to these companies. In our gold category, we have California